So this one, by the way, we're gonna we're gonna preemptively drop our like on this one because we've we've seen Dave McKeegan's videos in the past, a couple of them. We saw him host Simon Dan when he was out of town for a while, right? So I'm gonna preemptively drop a like on his 7 month old video because of the fact that I'm sure that I'm gonna enjoy it. I liked how he did his portions of things we've seen in the past, so I just assume we're gonna like it. If we have to revoke our like, I'll be highly disappointed. But like I was saying, they they have to explain orbits, right? Flat earthers have to explain orbits, so they're going to try to explain them here because even if the Earth is flat and everything's circling above us, that's an orbit that has to be explained, and nobody really has an explanation. So, at least not one that makes much sense. But we're going to see what they say because, like, so the issue with it is you have to explain how things aren't just plummeting into Earth constantly. And you also have to explain what keeps these things where they're at in space, circling this way. Like, you know what I mean? From our perspective, you're looking up and it's circling in the sky. What keeps them from just flying in a straight line and instead circling? What makes them do that? And how does that make any sense? Because the reason that orbits like this make sense at all, according to a global Earth theory believing individual, there's gravity. But the flat earthers continually argue that gravity is not a thing. So I don't know how they're going to explain this, but you know, this is a point that I hope that they try to explain that we're probably not going to hear anything about because that's the theme of flat earthers is they ignore the things that disprove them and they only talk about things that are like, hey, look, here's this, and they ignore things that don't support them, which is it's problematic to think that you have the correct idea about something if you ignore things that oppose your theory and just simply say that they're lying. We could all say that you're just lying as well, right? Like it's a weird way to frame your thought processes.
I've been experimenting recently with tracking different objects over a flat Earth map. The results are quite eye-opening, I think. There was a recent video from Eric Dubay who, well, he claimed he was reading an essay by William Carpenter from 1895, but I can't actually find any record of this essay, so I don't know if
That's
it's
interesting.
Carpenter's words or Eric's. Either way, they're quite ironic.
The astronomers now teach that the sun's distance from the Earth is from 92 to 93 million miles, whereas it is proved to be under 2,400 miles. Modern astronomy and its crafty or most deluded sycophants teach that the sun is stationary and the center.
Did you hear the way he just explained to literally anybody who doesn't believe in a flat Earth? If you believe what science has discovered about space and like our solar system, did you catch this?
2,400 miles. Modern astronomy and its crafty.
This is it. It's crafty.
Or most deluded sycophants teach that.
It's crafty or most deluded sycophants. That's anybody who understands what science has described as being the way that the solar system works and the way that things move in space and the shape of the Earth. That's what we are now. Congratulations. We're all in a special little club of short buzz people as been decided by the short buzz people.
The sun is stationary and the center of the planetary or celestial bodies, and that it is over 1 million miles larger than the Earth, whereas it is not 1,000th part of its size.
From people who say you shouldn't just believe what you're told to believe and that you should do your own research, comes 10 minutes of random assertions with absolutely no evidence to support them, just claims, opinions, and random memes, basically telling people what they should believe. But there was one bit in particular that sparked my interest, where they were talking about how seasons would work on a flat Earth.
Okay, so what he's talking about here is exactly correct. He's absolutely correct. This person's not doing any actual research of their own. They're just saying, hey, look, here are memes that support what I'm saying. Here's a claim that supports what I'm saying. But I'm not going to show you anything that actually proves what I'm saying. Meanwhile, all of the science, the things that the astronomers are saying and doing, it's if you know how to do the math, they show you the math that proves their point. If you know how to observe a lab result, they have all the lab results, thousands upon thousands of lab results that show these as being the case, like hundreds of thousands of these at a minimum at this point. They've been doing it for so long, there very well could be millions of these, especially if you include people in high school and middle school doing labs on these as well and coming up with these same results time and time again. So that's the difference between research here, is if you're citing scientific material, you are citing people who are doing things thousands and thousands and thousands of times, which is why it's important when things are new in science to look at both sides, because there are labs at the beginning of things where you're getting a lot of dispute because they have to narrow down the specifics of the lab results to actually narrow down exactly how this thing functions. And by doing hundreds of thousands of tests that are the same test over and over again, and just slowly eliminating different aspects of the test, they are able to narrow down what exactly is taking place within this, be it a life form, a virus, a bacteria, a mold, a spore, the makeup of what elements are present in Jupiter, the amount of planets orbiting the next closest star or the most prominent star in the closest galaxy that we can observe, to the amount of force that the sun is able to exert upon Mercury versus Earth versus Jupiter. These are all things that are done in this way. But that starts out being highly disputed because you're getting different results and you have to narrow down exactly where things are wrong and how you can replicate so that you're constantly getting the same results within a specific margin of error, and which is typically very small relatively to the subject at hand. So, thing is, you're going to have some variance, but it shouldn't be anything out of the ordinary.
Where they were talking about how seasons would work on a flat Earth.
Is constantly moving in spiral orbits, round and over the face of the motionless Earth.
That's what I want you to explain,
the
though.
latitude of those orbits about 10 or 11 miles every day, from June to December, and decreasing them in the same proportion from December to June.
So it slinkies out and in depending on the time of year? Is that what the fuck he's saying?
Now, this alone,
it still doesn't explain how that's... Why would it move that way? Why would the sun and the moon move like that?
Find quite amusing, because I've seen flat earthers argue that space can't be real because having an atmosphere next to a vacuum with no barrier would apparently break Newton's second law of thermodynamics. But having a sun that can not only drift its orbital path but also speed up on a larger orbit directly breaks Newton's laws of motion, unless there are some forces acting up on the sun to repeatedly change its movement and its speed.
Yeah.
A force that isn't gravity,
there you go.
Since, that apparently doesn't exist.
And laws of science like this, like laws of motion, the laws of thermodynamics, the reason that these exist is because they've been repeatedly proven so many times that it's and pretty much with no error at all, that it's considered to be law because it's something that never changes. It's constant. It's something you can count on in science to be a constant. So it's within our efforts to understand the universe around us. There are boundaries to what's possible and how things interact with each other, and that's what these laws are. That's us figuring out where these certain lines in how things function within the universe are at, where we find those boundaries. Oh, is it the new season of Stranger Things? Is that what this is? Uh-oh. Uh-oh. No, it's just trying to get you to go there.
But the bit that really caught my eye was that in both of those clips, the moon remains directly opposite the sun throughout.
Which makes me think that he's trying to explain the motion of the sun based on the moon, and it's also ignoring the fact that you ever have an eclipse.
And this is something I've seen in many different flat Earth examples before. Except we've all seen the moon in the middle of the day. So the moon can't remain directly opposite the sun at all times. Otherwise, we'd only ever see it at night, and it would always appear in exactly the same points in the sky at exactly the same time.
Not only that, but you'd always have the same phase of the moon all the time, be it anywhere from a new moon to a full moon. You would always have the same perspective of the moon. You'd never have a crescent moon. You'd never have a waxing or a waning moon of any degree. Because you're like it, even if you did, that's all it would ever be. Whatever shape the moon is in is the shape that the moon would always be in, because it's always being exposed to the same amount of sunlight, because it's always directly opposite of the sun.
Now, Eric does at least sort of address this by including a very subtle hint of a disclaimer stating, quote, "This does not necessarily represent the exact paths." So I went and mapped it out for myself, and it turns out his disclaimer would have probably been a bit more accurate if it had been worded along the lines of, "This isn't even close to accurate." Now, the great thing about all of this is anyone with just a little...
Don't use a diagram to support your position on an opinion or a topic or a debate of any form if it's going to be something that is not necessarily accurate. Okay? You just don't. It seems like something that would be common sense, but common sense not always so common. So, here we are.
A little bit of time can map these things out for themselves. There are plenty of websites and apps out there that track and map out the positions of where things like the sun and the moon not only are, but have been and will be. So it's very easy to verify. Just pick a random time and date in the future, look where the sun and the moon are supposed to be in relation to you, and then at that time go outside and see if they're there or not.
Easy.
Photographers use tools like this all the time to plan out very specific shots. For example, when they want a moon rising up over the horizon and they want people on a hill to be appearing like they're right in front of a big moon, they don't just randomly guess and hope for the best. They use apps like PhotoPills to work out exactly where the moon is supposed to be rising up, so that they can make sure that they're standing in exactly the right spot to put whatever subject they want in the foreground to be exactly on the path for the moon's rising. Now, I use the tracker on...
Yeah, otherwise they would spend countless hours standing in numerous spots and going, fuck, missed it. Better luck tomorrow. Like, it has to be something that you're able to easily predict with the patterns of how the sun and the moon move for people to be able to incorporate that as consistently as they do. Not only that, but for things to be predicted and forecasted. Like, we can predict and forecast where you would have to be on the planet for any given eclipse that we've got mapped out, because they only map out for a certain period of time. at once, just like they'll only forecast the weather for a certain period of time ahead of time, like, right? So there's a limit to how far ahead they look, and it goes for years. But you can look at every eclipse that's coming, and you can see where you're going to see that eclipse from the best on the planet. If you need to be out in the middle of the ocean, if you'd have to be up in the northern reaches of Alaska and Siberia, to if you need to be in China or Vietnam or Australia or New Zealand, Hawaii, Fiji, who knows, Madagascar, name a place. It shows you where you would have to be to see these the best. It tells you if it's going to be a solar eclipse or if it's going to be a lunar eclipse. It tells you if it's going to be something more rare, like a blood moon eclipse, a blood moon solar or lunar eclipse, to even be more specific about it. And it shows you exactly where you would need to be to see it to the fullest extent possible. So you can easily go out and see these things, but to be able to predict where this would be at from your perspective on the Earth, to be in the best spot to observe an eclipse, to know what time sunrise and sunset are going to be down to the minute. These are constant and predictable for a reason. And if your sun is changing speeds and it's changing locations constantly, then you have no predictability in there. Like, how are you predicting this unless it's on the exact same wonky path at same day every year, even though we have to adapt our calendar to add a day to it every year to remain accurate to the motion our planet takes around the sun to do one full, complete orbit.
On timeanddate.com, and I looked through the whole of December for this year in 6-hour intervals. And you can see, yes, the sun is following a pretty stable path around the southern hemisphere, but the moon, the path wavers quite drastically, starts in the north and finishes in the south over the course of the month. So I mapped these out, these 6-hour intervals, for about the first 3 weeks of December. And yes, at the start of December at 10:16 UTC time, the sun and the moon are indeed opposing each other, with the sun in the southern hemisphere and the moon in the northern hemisphere, just like Eric's clip suggests.
Okay.
But once they start moving, it becomes very apparent that the moon's path isn't consistent, and even its speed is appearing to change, with
Both
the
of
sun
them
actually gradually catching up to it and then eventually passing it. It becomes even more apparent if you look at the 4-week intervals. This is a map showing the sun and the moon's position at 10:16 UTC time every 4 weeks, starting from the
What? So the moon is moving laterally, and the sun is moving vertically? What? And apparently Africa is just always bathed in sunlight. What the fuck? Like, this makes no sense. What happened here?
beginning of January 2022 until around summer 2023. And you can see the sun at 10:16 is always directly over Africa, but it varies in latitude.
And how do you get this two-moon thing?
By the sun's
What?
orbit changing, and is explained on a globe by the Earth's tilt varying. But the moon at 10:16 not only changes latitude, but also longitude. It follows a wave, which can be explained on a globe by the fact that the moon is orbiting the Earth on a different orbital plane than the Earth is orbiting the sun. So their positions relative to each other can vary. Not quite sure how it's explained on a flat Earth, though, since it would require the sun and the moon to not only have forces acting upon them to vary their paths and speeds, but they have to be completely different forces because the paths aren't even the same.
And this is why I wanted that guy to explain and how the hell this is supposed to work. Because anything that's capable of being a force that's going to act upon the moon and the sun is also going to have to act upon the Earth. So, I just don't know how the hell you get around that.
I'm sure they'll just chalk it down to being a projector or something. So I then looked at the International Space...
They will because it's a firmament, and that's just us having a big blanket, basically, dome-shaped glass over the Earth, and everything is projected onto that dome, and we can't actually get past it. Our spaceships and all our rockets, they just smash into it and explode, or they come up close to it, and then they arc back down, and they just land in the ocean. And then they show us all these clips from the free fall, as well as just the astronauts underwater where they pretend that they're in space, because that's what supposedly is going on all the time.
Station. Now I know flat earthers will argue that the ISS is fake and it doesn't actually exist.
Mm-hmm.
Woohoo! Yeah!
But again, you can
It's
easily
either
test
fake and
this.
doesn't exist,
There's trackers
or
that tell you where and when
it's
it should pass
extra
you by,
special.
and you can go outside and see it pass you by. Again, photographers use the trackers like this to plan out the shots to know when the ISS will be transiting in front of the moon or even the sun.
Yep.
Hell, flat earthers have even done this. Jeranism did it a few years ago. Claimed the ISS was fake, used a tracker to work out exactly where and when it should pass in front of the moon.
My alarm went off on my phone, and I knew I had 10 seconds. I counted down in my head, 3, 2, 1. I remember waiting, like, what? And then sure enough, there it was.
And then later deleted the video. Even everyone's favourite flat earther Bob Nodal has admitted the ISS exists.
Is this will tell
Jesus.
you are able to enter in your location, your zip code, whatever, and it will tell you when the ISS is going over you, and it's going to where it's going to rise, how long it's going to stay in your visual sight, and when and where it's going to set. It tells you everything you would need to know to be able to spot this ISS light in the sky.
During a live talk on stage he was doing all about how the ISS doesn't exist.
Now, our Glober opponents would love to tell us, they would love to validate NASA by saying things like, I know the ISS is real. I've seen it with my own eyes. It's absolutely there. You can't deny it. We can take pictures of it. It's there. You guys are just idiots, right?
He even then asked a room full of flat earthers if they've seen it as well.
Witnessed an ISS transit over the top of you. Let's show of hands. All right, well, quite a few of you. And like I said, if you haven't, you can see Spot the Station. You can go and do this for yourself.
Thanks, Bob. So regardless of whether or
God.
not you think the ISS that's shown on the
What?
live streams from NASA...
So he's acknowledging that not only can you see that it's there, but that people in there have also been like, yeah, I see this. Like, everybody here at my little Flat Earth talk with Flat Earth people is clearly here. And, a lot of you have also seen this as it passes overhead. You've seen the ISS. Good, I'm happy you've seen that. Now we can discuss how that's fake. What the fuck is he talking about?
is real or not, seems we're all in agreement that there is something orbiting up there that is shaped like the ISS and sits closer to the Earth than the Moon is, and it appears in the skies exactly where and when the trackers state it will. So I went to try and plot out the tracking positions for the ISS onto a flat Earth model. A little bit more complex, to be fair, than the Sun or the Moon, because it's got a much shorter orbit time and it covers a much greater area of the Earth's surface on a given day. Fortunately, though, I was able to find a fantastic video that's modelling the ISS's orbit over both a globe and a flat plane, done by Janosch Gaia. I do apologise if I've just butchered that name. But it's the ISS tracked over the course of about 5 days.
Now, pay attention to how it moves here and explain this motion and how that would exist.
And displayed on both a rotating globe and a flat Earth. Now, you can see the globe's path. The ISS is orbiting in a straight line, but it's slightly off of the Earth's axis of rotation, which is causing it to drift over which part of the Earth's surface it's orbiting, as the Earth rotates. But flat earthers say the Earth doesn't spin. So I've corrected the flat Earth video to keep the flat Earth static, and this is the path that the ISS takes.
So it's not covering this space here, and it's not covering this space here, but it's moving in a constant kind of oval shape, leaving the same distance between each of these intervals where it crosses itself, almost as if there's something right here in the middle of this point that it's not crossing, that it's actually just flying in a circle over time and time again as one of them remains spinning, which would have to be the one here, because if this is just simply doing a circle, this would have to be spinning to make this come the same distance off over and over again. It's got to be spinning at a constant rate of speed for you to be covering a different portion of it every time that you cross, right? By the same amount. It would have to be a constant speed. So that rotation on the Earth's axis that goes from this point to the South Pole, which if you were to just fold this map into itself, that's all this is the South Pole, Antarctica down there, bing, right on the opposite end of this. And it's just circling it over and over again. It's incredible that that's not something that's comprehended, especially when you look at this and you realize the further out you get, the bigger these rings are, showing that they're stretching this globe, like this, the shape of the Earth, they're stretching it to become wider as they get to the outside. Now, if they were to just stop in the middle and then reverse those sizes so that it comes back down to as close as it is up here as it is out here on this edge, you'd have a fucking ball. Instead of just stretching the bottom of the ball out until it becomes a disc.
I have no idea what forces could be at play to cause that sort of a spiraling orbit, unless the firmament is literally a giant kid's spiral.
Yes, this is what would have to happen. You'd have to have something outside holding it and something inside manipulating it.
Graph set.
Explain
and again,
yourself.
With huge speed-ups required to cover the arc of the southern hemisphere.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, maybe the Earth's like a giant Mario Kart and there's big speed boost ramps up there. I don't know. The southern hemisphere is certainly a giant thorn in the side of the flat Earth ideology, though. Speaking of which, we come to the final segment, which is long-haul flights. Now, flat earthers have long claimed that there are no direct flights around the southern hemisphere and that you have to take stopovers in the northern hemisphere, and that somehow proved the Earth was flat because it was really them flying in a straight line. Now, I know the topics of long-haul flights have been covered by others before, but I found 3 flights of particular interest that basically circumnavigate the entire southern hemisphere. Latam Airlines flights LA 800 and 801 fly regularly between Australia and Chile with a stopover in New Zealand. So it flies non-stop from Auckland to Santiago, Chile, and then the same again on the way back, and then carries on to Sydney. Then from Sydney, you can jump on Qantas flights QF 63 and 64 that fly directly to and from Johannesburg. Now, while there are no flights from the country of South Africa over to South America, you can take a 1,500-mile road trip from Johannesburg to Luanda in Angola, which is still south of the equator, and from there, you can take Angola Airlines flight DT747 or 748 to Sao Paulo, Brazil, which is only a 1,600-mile road trip back to Santiago, Chile. And again, each of those flights can be found on trackers and checked. You could go to the airports if you want to make sure the planes exist. I mean, you could just get on the plane while you're there. There's even amateur plane spotters who've got videos of some of the flights taking off and landing at different airports. Now, that in of itself, I know, doesn't directly disprove the flat Earth, but it does disprove the claim that you can't fly around the southern hemisphere.
Yes, but then their next argument is that you're not allowed to fly over the South Pole. And you're not allowed to fly over the North Pole. But what they fail to understand is that these are regulations that have been put in place for a long time, and the concern is how it impacts your compass as well as navigational equipment on the aircraft. Like there's safety concerns about it that lead to that being a no-fly zone directly over the poles. But yeah, people do fly into Antarctica, and people do travel around Antarctica, which is the outside rim of what they're using as their model of the Earth. But the time it would take to do that outside rim does not even come close to how long it takes to actually just sail in a boat around the edge of Antarctica as it would to go around that outside rim.
Where it kind of presents a problem for the flat Earth is the distance and the flight times. Those 3 flights combined total 32 hours. Now, mapped out on a globe, the total flight distance travelled is 15,500 miles, which averages out at about 480 miles an hour. Pretty average cruising speed for a commercial aircraft.
Yeah,
On a
it's
flat
about right.
Earth, though, the total distance to follow that same path is 46,500 miles, which equates to an average cruising speed of 1,457 miles an hour. Kind of impressive considering...
That's insanely impressive. And they aren't doing air refueling along the way with fuel tankers to replace the fuel that they're burning while they do that, meanwhile having to also slow down to get fuel and then speed back up to go that fast again. So they'd have to actually be going much faster than that the majority of the time, because when you're going that fast, you're burning through your fuel and you have to get more of it, and the tankers can't fly that fast.
There are no current commercial aircraft that are capable of breaking the sound barrier of 767 miles an hour. Of course, you could argue that the planes don't really follow the routes that the trackers state that they are, and instead take the most direct route secretly. But even that still totals 37,000 miles. Now, you might get away with doing that on the New Zealand to Chile or the Angola to Brazil flights because you're pretty much all over ocean anyway. Australia to Johannesburg, not so simple, because the stated route for that is that you fly from Sydney, you go southwest straight out over the ocean, and then you don't see land again until you pretty much reach Johannesburg. To do it on a flat map, though, to take a direct route, you'd have to take off from Sydney, fly northwest over the whole of Australia, then cross the Philippines and Thailand and India, down the coast of Somalia, and then cross the whole of Mozambique for good measure. And I kind of think someone on board might have noticed. I mean, what can I say? I know for most flat earthers, all of this will probably be in one ear, dismissed straight out the other.
They probably just don't even watch it.
But it's still fun to discuss it, I think. And who knows, maybe it will find its way to some people who genuinely are on the fence about the shape of it. I don't know.
The fact that whole portion of the flight on a flat Earth would have to be over land, and it's not, and the fact that they could get on that flight and take it just so that they know that they're not being lied to and show us the amount of times that they actually fly over land, then there you have it. But that's not going to happen.
Either way, that is going to conclude this particular video. Leave your thoughts in the comments down below. While you're down there, if you enjoyed this video and you haven't already done so, then please consider hitting the like and subscribe button, and then hopefully we'll see you in the next video.
Bam! And there we go. I said preemptively dropped our like on there because we were, like I said, I was expecting to like it because that's typically how it goes. I know that I like his content. So, easily done. Easily done.